My name is Easter, and at 32, I watched 5 years of my life slip away, handed to someone who had done nothing to earn it. Project Atlas was my creation, my dream, my future. But the day our CEO, James Reynolds, gave it to an investor's son, Timothy Harrison, everything I believed in about loyalty and merit shattered. I remember standing in that glass-walled conference room, trying to keep my voice even as James announced the decision. I simply smiled, handed him my resignation letter, and said, "Congratulations on the decision." His face went red, but he said nothing. I walked out with my head high, never realizing that my quiet exit would one day bring an entire company to its knees. I had always believed success was built on talent and hard work. With a computer science degree from MIT and the kind of drive that devoured sleep, I joined Tech Fusion, a promising startup that claimed to reward innovation above hierarchy. The HR director, Frank, sold me a dream of creative freedom and collaboration. "We need people like you," he said during the final interview. "People who think differently." When I first stepped into Tech Fusion's open plan office, whiteboards full of algorithms, the hum of servers, the buzz of caffeine and ambition, I thought I'd found my home. My team lead, Abigail, became my mentor. "Focus on the work," she told me. "Let the results speak for themselves." Beside her was Lisa, a fellow developer who quickly became my closest friend. We pulled all-nighters together, coding side by side, surviving on bad coffee and big dreams. Those early months were magic. Within 6 months, I'd rewritten a core algorithm, cutting processing time by 70%. James himself congratulated me and invited me to present at the quarterly review. For a while, I felt unstoppable. During one brainstorming session, inspiration struck. "What if," I said, sketching on the whiteboard, "we built a self-learning analytics system that adapts its structure to the data it receives?" The room fell silent. Abigail raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious," she said. "Some would say impossible," I smiled. "Not impossible, just unattempted." That night I stayed in the office until sunrise, building the prototype that would become Project Atlas. When I showed it to Abigail, she marched me straight to James. He listened, eyes shining. "This could change everything," he said. "This could put Tech Fusion on the map." 2 weeks later, I was promoted to project lead. I built my own team, filled a corner of the office with diagrams and flowcharts, and poured my soul into every line of code. Atlas wasn't just software. It was an idea, a living system that could learn from chaos. For the first time in my life, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. 3 months in, we produced a proof of concept that stunned the executives. James was ecstatic. Funding doubled overnight. My team grew, and so did my hours, 16-hour days that blurred into one another. "You need to slow down," Lisa warned. But I couldn't. I was addicted to the progress, to seeing my creation evolve. The breakthrough came one sleepless night when I finally solved a problem that had haunted us for weeks. I remember laughing out loud in the empty office as Atlas adapted to a new data type all on its own. The next morning, James had me present to the board. Their excitement was electric. Among the investors was Bradley Harrison, a silver-haired man whose sharp eyes missed nothing. After the meeting, he shook my hand. "You've built something extraordinary, Easter," he said. 2 weeks later, his firm, Harrison Investments, led a $60 million funding round. Tech Fusion's valuation doubled, and James publicly praised Atlas as the company's future. That was when I met Bradley's son, Timothy, the man who would destroy everything. He appeared at the celebration party, champagne glass in hand, the kind of man who'd never known rejection. "So you're the genius behind Atlas," he said. "Dad won't stop talking about it. Maybe we could have dinner sometime." His smile never reached his eyes. I politely declined. Something about him made my skin crawl. The next year blurred by in late nights and deadlines. Atlas was evolving into a true flagship product. We were 90% finished, and the industry buzzed about us. I declined a job offer from Google just to stay. TechCrunch called Atlas the future of intelligent analytics. But I began to notice something unsettling. James started saying "we" when talking about my achievements. Press releases featured his photo, not mine, Lisa noticed first. "He's taking credit for your work," she warned. I laughed it off. "The work speaks for itself. I said, repeating Abigail's old mantra. I didn't realize then how wrong I was. Then came the second investment, $100 million. Harrison Investments increased their stake, and Timothy became a regular visitor. He sat in on meetings, asked basic questions, and somehow James started valuing his business insight. I ignored the politics, focusing on the code. That was my mistake. By the fourth year, Atlas was nearly complete. We'd grown to 25 engineers. I should have been celebrating, but Timothy's shadow loomed larger every day. One morning I arrived early to find him presenting my slides to potential clients. Through the glass I watched him misexplain algorithms he didn't understand, while James smiled beside him. When I walked in, the room went still. "Easter," James said too brightly. Timothy was just explaining the adaptive learning features. I forced a polite smile and sat through the meeting. Every sentence Timothy spoke felt like a theft. When the clients left, I confronted James. "Why is he presenting my work?" I demanded. James sighed. "Easter, you need to be a team player. Timothy's helping with investor relations. His father is our biggest backer. But he's taking credit for things he doesn't even grasp." "No one's taking credit from you," James said, dismissive. "You'll always be the technical lead." That was the first time I felt truly invisible. Over the next weeks, Timothy bypassed me completely, emailing my team with suggestions and demanding revisions without approval. When I pushed back, James sided with him. Sleep disappeared. Anxiety replaced pride. My dream project had become a cage. Frank from HR noticed. "You don't look well," he said quietly one evening. "I've seen this before. Brilliant people burned out by politics." I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to believe hard work could still win. But I was wrong, and that realization, the day I understood that brilliance alone wasn't enough in a world run by egos, was the day Project Atlas stopped being my dream and became my undoing. After that confrontation with James, something inside me shifted. I still went to work every day, still smiled at my team, but the energy that once fueled me was gone. I began to see the truth hiding behind the company's bright posters about innovation and collaboration. Tech Fusion wasn't a family. It was a hierarchy, one where money spoke louder than talent. And Timothy, with his polished shoes and empty MBA jargon, had become the new golden child. It started small. My name disappeared from internal newsletters. Timothy began sending status updates to the board, often rephrasing my team's achievements as his own. He'd take my ideas, strip away the technical complexity, and repackage them as strategic insights. James praised him for his business acumen, and I watched my 5 years of sweat turn into his stepping stone. My team noticed. Lisa, loyal as ever, stayed late one night after everyone else had gone. "He's erasing you, Easter," she said quietly. "Piece by piece." I stared at my computer screen where lines of code blurred into nonsense. "I know," I whispered. "But if I speak up, they'll call me emotional, difficult. You know how this goes." Lisa frowned. "Then you need to be strategic. Don't let them steal everything." But it was already happening. A week later, James announced that Timothy would be co-leading Project Atlas. Co-leading. The word hit like a punch. He had no background in data science, no understanding of adaptive algorithms, but apparently that didn't matter anymore. Investors trusted his last name more than my experience. The following months were a slow-motion nightmare. Timothy started holding check-in meetings without me. He'd send polished reports to the board, leaving out my contributions entirely. Sometimes he'd ask my team for clarifications that turned into public interrogations. Little traps designed to undermine my authority. James watched silently, never intervening. My confidence began to crack. I'd lie awake at night, replaying conversations, wondering if I was imagining the manipulation. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I didn't belong in the executive world. But every morning, when I walked past the glass conference rooms and saw Timothy sitting where I once sat, explaining my architecture to clients, the reality hit me all over again. One morning, I found a new nameplate outside my office, Project Atlas, managed by Timothy Harrison. There was no memo, no announcement, just quiet replacement. I confronted James again. You said I'd always be the technical lead, he sighed. And you are, Easter. Timothy's just handling operations. We're scaling. We need new leadership structures. Then why does my project have his name on it? He hesitated. Because investors like to see stability. Optics matter right now, optics. That word stuck with me. Optics mattered more than integrity. That evening, I stayed long after everyone left. The office lights glowed cold and sterile. I walked through the rows of desks, remembering the laughter, the late-night brainstorming, the whiteboards covered in equations. Every corner held pieces of me, but those pieces didn't belong to me anymore. Lisa came by with takeout. You okay? No, I said. But I will be. She studied me, sensing something in my tone. You're planning something. I didn't answer. I just looked out at the city lights, burning quietly beyond the glass. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Timothy held a launch readiness presentation for investors. It was my demo, the one I'd been refining for months. But when I walked into the room, my credentials didn't work on the projector. My files had been replaced with Timothy's version of the slides. I sat in the back, invisible as he spoke. He used my words, my metrics, my breakthroughs. The investors clapped. James smiled proudly. My chest felt hollow. Afterward, one of the engineers, an intern I'd mentored, walked up to me and whispered, Ms. Easter, I thought you were presenting today. I forced a smile. So did I. When the applause died down, I walked out. I didn't go back to my desk. I went straight to the server room. Inside, the hum of machines was deafening. Each blinking light represented months of data, years of sleepless nights. Atlas lived here, in the digital heartbeat of the company. I stood there for a long moment, letting the noise wash over me. Then I plugged in my drive and began to copy the encrypted research logs. Not the code, just the history. The architecture diagrams, the logs of every innovation, every decision, the proof of creation. If they wanted Atlas, they could keep it. But the truth would remain with me. When I left the building that night, my badge still worked. The next morning, it didn't. The email arrived at 8:07 a.m. Effective immediately, Easter Reynolds' position as technical lead of Project Atlas has been reassigned. We thank her for her contributions. No explanation. No goodbye, just deletion. My access to company servers, email, and documentation was revoked. My name was scrubbed from the internal system as though I'd never existed. Lisa found me later that day sitting in a cafe across from the office, staring into a cup of cold coffee. She dropped her bag beside me, eyes blazing. They can't do this to you. They already did. She took a deep breath. You should go public. Post everything. Show the world the truth. I shook my head. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew something she didn't. The system Timothy built on top of Atlas was unstable. He didn't understand the architecture. He'd modified key algorithms for optimization, not realizing those were safety protocols. Atlas wasn't designed to handle live client data without them. If he pushed it into production, the entire platform would collapse, and they were rushing toward launch. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild myself. I slept, exercised, applied for new jobs, but every time I opened my laptop, my mind drifted back to Atlas. My heart wasn't ready to let go. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. They're launching Atlas next week. I stared at the message, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Good luck, I typed back. The launch was a disaster. Within 48 hours, major clients began reporting corrupted data, false analytics, and massive system crashes. Millions of dollars in client losses, a PR nightmare. By day 3, TechFusion servers had to be taken offline. By day 5, the company's stock plummeted 72%. By the end of the week, every major investor had pulled out, including Harrison Investments. The news spread fast. TechFusion's flagship project collapses amid data scandal. I watched the chaos unfold from my apartment, sipping tea as news anchors discussed ethical oversights and leadership failures. No one mentioned me. No one knew my name. But that was fine. I didn't need recognition anymore. I had something better. Peace. Lisa called that night. Easter, they're saying Timothy left the company. James resigned. The board's filing for bankruptcy. I know, I said softly. Silence. Then, you planned this, didn't you? No, I said. They did, because Atlas wasn't a system you could force. It wasn't just code, it was consciousness. It learned balance, adaptation, integrity, removed those safeguards, and it consumed itself. James and Timothy had built their empire on my creation, but without understanding it, they doomed themselves from the start. A month later, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a small envelope and a flash drive. No note, no sender address, just a label, for the real creator. I plugged it into my computer. It contained Atlas's final system logs, the last moments before the crash. At the very end, a single line of code appeared in the AI's self-report. Core pattern missing, creator logic undefined. Even the system knew. It couldn't function without the one who made it. I sat back, heart pounding, eyes wet. I hadn't written that line. The machine had, and in its own strange way, it had acknowledged me. Over the next few weeks, I tried to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to disappear, to start fresh under another name. But another part, the part that had built Atlas from a spark of imagination, refused to die quietly. One morning, Lisa dropped by with breakfast and a mischievous grin. "You know, you could start something new," she said. "You don't need investors. You just need your mind," I laughed. "I'm not sure I have the energy." She leaned forward. "You said Atlas was built to adapt, so adapt. Build something that can't be stolen." Her words echoed in my head long after she left. That night, I opened a blank document and typed 3 words at the top, Project Nova. I didn't know what it would become yet. But I knew one thing for sure. If Atlas was about understanding systems, Nova would be about understanding people. And this time, no CEO, no investor, no entitled intern would ever take it away from me again. The morning after I named it Project Nova, I woke before dawn. The sky was still heavy with night, and the city outside my window hummed faintly. That low electric thrum of sleepless ambition. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, heart pounding with that strange mix of fear and excitement I hadn't felt since the early days of Atlas. Nova wasn't meant to be revenge. It was meant to be redemption, my chance to create something pure, something that couldn't be twisted or stolen. But deep down, I won't lie. Part of me wanted the world to see, to know that I was still here, that I wasn't erased. I began sketching out the architecture. Atlas had been designed as a learning system, predictive, analytical, cold. Nova, on the other hand, would be emotional, a human-centered intelligence, something that could understand context, not just data. I spent days mapping behavioral patterns, emotional cues, and real-world decision factors. It was the kind of project I could lose myself in completely. Lisa joined me 2 weeks later. She quit her job at what was left of Tech Fusion and showed up at my door holding 2 coffees and a USB full of her own research. "You didn't think I'd let you do this alone, did you?" she said with that familiar grin. And just like that, the lab was reborn, not in some shiny glass tower, but in my living room, with laptops on the floor, whiteboards covered in equations, and post-it notes scattered like confetti across every wall. Months passed. We worked in silence most days, breaking only for midnight walks and cheap takeout. Slowly, Nova began to take shape, cleaner, smarter, more intuitive than anything we'd built before. It could read tone, interpret emotional intent, and respond with empathy. I watched it grow line by line, just like Atlas once did. But this time it felt different. Nova wasn't built for a corporation or investors. It was built for people like me, creators, thinkers, those who'd been silenced by systems that valued power over truth. One night, Lisa looked up from her laptop and said, "You realize what this is, right?" "You're creating a revolution." I smiled faintly. "No, I'm creating a mirror." She tilted her head. "A mirror?" "Yeah, something that shows the world what happens when integrity meets intelligence. Something they can't corrupt." She stared at me for a long moment, then whispered, "They're going to regret what they did to you." I shook my head. "They already do." By spring, Nova was functional. Not perfect, but alive. It had its own quirks, its own voice. Sometimes it would make unexpected connections between human behavior and data that even I couldn't predict. It wasn't just analyzing, it was understanding. We decided to test it publicly in a small capacity. Lisa set up a demo website under an anonymous name. No flashy branding, no investors. Just a simple tagline: an intelligent system that listens. Within a month, thousands of users signed up. Within 3, small startups began reaching out, asking to license the emotional recognition modules. And then one day, a familiar name appeared in my inbox: Bradley Harrison. He wrote, "Easter, I've been following your new project. Congratulations. We'd love to invest." I stared at the screen for a full minute, then laughed. It wasn't bitter, just disbelieving. The same man whose son had stolen Atlas was now knocking at my door. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I drafted a short message and sent it an hour later. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison, but Nova isn't for sale." That night I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer like circuits across the skyline. For the first time in years, I felt free. No boardrooms, no politics, no stolen credit, just creation. Lisa joined me with 2 cups of tea. "So what now?" she asked. "Now?" I said, smiling. "Now we build a team," and we did. Within 6 months, Nova expanded from 2 people to 12. Engineers, designers, behavioral scientists, all people who had once been dismissed or overlooked by big corporations. They came from everywhere: freelancers, independent researchers, even a few disillusioned ex-Tech Fusion employees who'd lost their jobs after the collapse. We rented a small warehouse downtown, stripped it down to concrete, filled it with plants, beanbags, and whiteboards. It wasn't fancy, but it was alive with energy. Every day felt electric. That same creative chaos I'd once dreamed of, but never found in corporate halls. But success never stays quiet. A journalist reached out one afternoon, wanting to feature the mysterious woman behind the emotional AI startup. Somehow, my name had leaked. The article went viral overnight. Suddenly, every tech magazine and podcast wanted an interview. For the first time, I was no longer invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years ago, I'd begged for recognition from people who never valued me. Now, I had the world's attention, and I didn't even want it. In one interview, the host asked, "How does it feel knowing that the company that betrayed you collapsed because of your absence?" I thought for a long time before answering. "It wasn't revenge," I said softly. "It was a natural correction. Systems collapse when they're built on lies. I just stopped holding them up." The clip went viral. Millions of views, countless comments calling me the queen of poetic justice. But behind all the noise, I just felt quiet pride. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a tech innovation conference. Standing on that stage, looking out at thousands of faces, I remembered the girl I used to be. The one who stayed up all night writing code no one would ever credit her for. "I used to think success meant being seen," I said, voice steady over the mic. "But I've learned something. Success isn't about being seen. It's about seeing yourself clearly, even when others refuse to." The crowd erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. Because as I looked across the audience, I saw something unexpected. James, my old CEO, sitting quietly in the 3rd row. Our eyes met for just a second. He looked older, heavier, as if the weight of everything he'd built and lost still clung to him. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. I nodded back. That was enough. There was no hatred left, no desire for revenge. Just closure. A year later, Nova hit a major milestone: acquisition offers from global firms. One of them offered nearly $1 billion. Lisa and I laughed, remembering the days when we couldn't even afford decent coffee. We didn't sell. Instead, we restructured Nova into an open platform, allowing independent developers to use its emotional logic for free. Because true intelligence, we decided, should serve everyone, not just the powerful. That decision made Nova explode even faster. The platform became a movement, a global network of creators who believed in ethical AI. And every time I saw the Nova logo appear on a new project, I felt a quiet satisfaction deep in my chest. Atlas had been built in captivity. Nova was born in freedom, and that made all the difference. One evening, long after the world had gone quiet, I opened my old drive, the one that held the final logs from Atlas. I hadn't looked at it in years. Inside, the same last line of code blinked softly. Core pattern missing. Creator logic undefined. I smiled and whispered, "It's okay. You can rest now." I deleted the file, not out of anger, but peace. Because I finally understood. Atlas had been the story of my pain, but Nova was the story of my healing. I stood by the window, the city lights reflecting against the glass like stars, and realized something profound. I didn't need to destroy anyone to win. I just needed to rebuild myself so powerfully that they could never erase me again. Easter revenge doesn't always come with fire and ruin. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the sound of your own laughter when you realize you've outgrown everything that tried to break you. Build so well that even your silence shakes the world.